The world we live in is faced with a number of wicked type problems, whether it be poverty, human-induced climate change, or nature loss, all which affect the well-being of current and future generations. They're referred to as wicked type problems, not because of their evil intentions, but rather because of their complexity, interconnectedness, as well as their reinforcing nature. For example, the Living Planet report by WWF found that there's been a 69% decline in species population globally since 1970. Within the same time frame, the Intergovernmental Panel on Climate Change found that there's been a global average temperature increase of about 1.2 degrees Celsius. Now, that's not a coincidence. Addressing wicked type problems requires collective actions from all walks of life, as well as all knowledge disciplines. I've had a chance to work and live, as well as lead projects that address these kind of problems. From various landscapes such as the Kafue Flats in Southern Province, the Liu and Barotse in Western, as well as the Kabompo in Northwestern. I've also had a chance to do some amazing research looking at the social dimensions of conservation outcomes, such as trust, power, as well as the role of heritage and culture. One of the questions that always lingered in my mind is, what makes projects succeed or fail? For a very long time, conservation theory and practice is based on the premise that if you give local communities adequate financing, technology, and knowledge, conservation outcomes are almost guaranteed. In 2018, I was lucky enough to get a job with WWF, working on the Barotse floodplain of Zambia. I've now lived and worked in Western Province for close to 6 years. It's a place that I now call home. Now, just a note on the Barotse floodplain. It's the second largest wetland ecosystem. It's got over 300 bird species as well as diversity of vegetation. The system is driven by the hydrology of the Zambezi River as well as its tributaries. That leads into the annual flooding and receding of the floodplain, almost resembling a breathing action of the wetland. And in many ways, it is alive. One of the issues I was glad to be working on was issues to do with sustainable fisheries management, as well as leading the work on the inscription of the Barotse floodplain as a World Heritage Cultural Landscape. This is based on the premise that the Barotse floodplain has got outstanding universal attributes that make it stand out from anywhere else on Earth. This includes the network of canals that traverse the wetland system, the royal burial mounds where past kings or litungas are buried and eventually a community is formed, as well as the traditional management governance practices of the Lozi-speaking people. In many ways, the Barotse floodplain is an evolved cultural landscape that reflects the cultural values of the Lozi-speaking people, as well as the opportunities and constraints of their environment. In this way, I think the insights and lessons can be harnessed from there in terms of how to harness local knowledge systems in addressing local knowledge systems. I shall present to you two instances that help me present these instances. They're all based on the following headlines. One, local knowledge and context matter. The second one, co-creation of knowledge as a relational process. The first instance takes place in a village called Liyoyelelo. Now, Liyoyelelo is a permanent community on the Barotse floodplain, just a few kilometers from the King Luosi Bridge. In one of these community meetings, we're talking about sustainable fisheries management. Now, there are two classes of fishing methods as well as gears. On one hand, you have the formal fishing methods and gears, which are generally recognized and enforced within the Fisheries Management Act. On the other, you have the traditional fishing methods, which includes various spears, hooks, as well as traditional baskets and traps. Generally, the fish net size above 3 inches is the one that's generally prescribed and enforced in the law. In one of these community meetings, a lady stood up and started to explain to me how communities understand the system as more of a dynamic ecosystem. She did this by way of using the Silozi calendar, which has got 12 months and depicts the relationship between the hydrology of the ecosystem, the various human activities, whether it be fishing, agriculture, or livestock grazing, as well as the behavior of animals, whether it be, for example, birds, fish, as well as other fauna. In this way, between April and November, cattle grazing and to a certain degree, agriculture is the main livelihood stay on the Barotse floodplain. Cattle is moved from one crow to the other, thereby nourishing the land, of which crops are eventually grown before the onset of the rainy season. As the rains increase and the flood starts to swell, cattle is moved from the lowland to the upland. This process peaks between the month of February and March within the iconic Komboka ceremony of the Loza-speaking people. Now, what is interesting about this whole process is the diversity of habitats that is created as the floodplain increases in size. On one hand, you have the flooded grasslands. You have the various tributaries and river systems, as well as the sandy beaches. Within this system, as the floodplain starts to increase, the fisheries starts to then move and access newly habitable habitats. In the same way, local communities use various fishing methods to access and fish these various fishing habitats. For example, there's a fish trap called makuko. Makuko is a traditional fishing basket that is specifically suited to catch smaller fish species which are placed along the riverbank and have got smaller life cycle but also reproduce at high rates. Makuko, therefore, helps local communities to take advantage of this fish species that has got a smaller life cycle but then also reproduces at very high rates. In this way, traditional fishing methods reflect the long-term understanding of local communities and how they understand the opportunities and constraints of their environment. Not harnessing or recognizing these traditional fishing methods in a way is a failure to truly capture these indigenous knowledge systems in formal fisheries management frameworks. The second instance takes place in a community engagement meeting in Mongu, Western Province. Now, if you're a developmental practitioner, you may have used words like sensitization, awareness building, or even impacting knowledge. After a number of these community sensitization meetings, a prince or Mwanamulena approached me and said, perhaps changing the title of the meeting would be more appropriate. The term sensitization did not really capture the nature of the meeting, which was more of a relational and dialogue process than anything else. And he was right. Words such as sensitization assume a one-way flow of information from the NGO to the local community. Appreciating culture as a frame of response, as a frame of reference held by community reveals that there are actually multiple ways of knowing, understanding, as well as conceiving an idea. In this way, conservation projects should be seen as having partial knowledge held by the technocrats as well as local communities through their cultural reference point that results in a co-production of knowledge for all stakeholders involved, including the technocrats. Another key lesson from this process is that stakeholder engagement is a relational process. Relational baggage, whether it be trust or misconceptions, can affect the success or failure of a project. And just as in any relationship, whether it be personal or organizational, it's important for communities to release this emotive relational baggage before they can be able to sit down and co-create this knowledge with you. The scientific facts are just as important as the relational and emotive aspect of stakeholder engagement. I'd like to end again with my opening statement. We live in a world which is immensely more complex, connected. Addressing wicked-type problems requires us to rethink the manner in which knowledge is produced, how solutions are identified, applied, and eventually owned by community. It is only in this way that local communities will be able to experiment with the knowledge, break it apart just as in a Rubik's Cube, and finally own the final project outcome of the project. Thank you.